The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the saloon in Kingston, New Mexico territory, and Willa Greene tumbled out more than stepped, her shoulders shaking so violently that the driver nearly reached out to catch her before deciding better of it and simply tipping his hat. The September heat of 1881 pressed down on the dusty street like a wool blanket, but Willa felt cold straight through to her bones despite the sweat trickling down her spine beneath her travel-stained dress. She clutched a worn carpetbag to her chest and looked around with wide, terrified eyes at the unfamiliar town that was supposed to be her salvation. Kingston had sprung up almost overnight when silver was discovered in the nearby Black Range Mountains, and now it bustled with miners, merchants, gamblers, and all manner of folks hoping to strike it rich, or at least make a living off those who did. The street was crowded with freight wagons, horses, and people going about their business under the late afternoon sun. Nobody paid much attention to one more frightened woman arriving on the stage, which was both a relief and somehow made Willa feel even more alone. She had nowhere to go. The letter in her pocket from her aunt promising her a home and work had been written 3 months ago, and Willa had spent every penny she had to make the journey from St. Louis, only to learn from the stage driver that her aunt had died of fever 2 weeks past. The driver had been sympathetic but firm when he told her he could not take her back, that she had paid for passage one way, and he had no authority to do otherwise. So here she stood in a strange town in the middle of the New Mexico territory with 47 cents to her name, no family, no prospects, and no idea what to do next. Her shoulders trembled harder as the reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. She was 21 years old, alone, and about to be homeless in a rough mining town where a woman without protection was vulnerable in ways she did not want to contemplate. The trembling spread from her shoulders down her arms until her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her bag. "Miss, you all right there?" The voice was deep and gentle, with a warm drawl that made each word sound like it had been dipped in honey. Willa looked up and found herself staring at a man who seemed to block out the sun itself. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build that spoke of years of hard work. His face was tanned and weathered, with strong features that might have been carved from the same stone as the mountains surrounding the town. He wore dusty work clothes, a worn leather vest, and a hat pushed back on his head to reveal dark hair and eyes the color of strong coffee. Willa tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. Her shoulders shook harder, and to her absolute horror, she felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She would not cry. She had promised herself she would not cry. But everything was too much, too overwhelming, and she could feel herself breaking apart right there in the middle of the street. The man must have seen something in her face, because his expression shifted from polite concern to something deeper, more protective. He stepped closer, not touching her but positioning himself in a way that blocked the view of curious onlookers and gave her a small measure of privacy. "Hey now," he said softly, his voice pitched low so only she could hear. "You look like you have had about the worst day imaginable. My name is Quinn Irving, and I promise you I mean no harm. But you are shaking like a leaf in a windstorm, and I think you might need someone to help steady you before you fall right over." Willa tried to nod, tried to speak, tried to do anything other than stand there trembling, but her body would not cooperate. The fear and exhaustion and grief she had been holding at bay for weeks came flooding through her all at once, and her knees started to buckle. Quinn moved fast, catching her elbow with one hand while his other hand came up to support her upper arm. His touch was firm but careful, steadying her without being presumptuous. "Whoa there, easy now, I have got you. You are safe." Those 3 words, spoken with such simple conviction, broke something loose inside Willa. A sob escaped her throat before she could stop it, and then another. Her shoulders shook even harder, this time with the force of tears she could no longer contain. "All right, that is all right," Quinn said, his voice remaining calm and soothing. "You just cry if you need to, but let us get you somewhere less public, shall we? Can you walk?" Willa managed a jerky nod. Quinn kept his hand on her elbow, guiding her away from the saloon and down the street toward a modest building with a sign that read, Irving Ranch Supply. He led her around to the side where there was a small bench in the shade and helped her sit down before crouching in front of her so they were at eye level. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked gently. "Willa," she managed to choke out between sobs. "Willa Greene." "Miss Greene, it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Do you have people in Kingston? Someone I can fetch for you?" Willa shook her head, clutching her carpetbag tighter. "My aunt. I came to stay with my aunt, but she is dead. I have nowhere." "No money?" "Nothing." She saw understanding dawn in Quinn's dark eyes, followed by something that looked like determination. He straightened up and settled onto the bench beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough that she could feel his solid, reassuring presence. "How long has it been since you have eaten?" he asked. Willa had to think about it. "Yesterday morning, I think, before we changed stages in Las Cruces." Quinn made a sound low in his throat that might have been disapproval but not directed at her. "Right. First things first then. You are going to come with me to the boarding house just up the street. Mrs. Patterson runs it, and she is a good woman. We will get some food in you and figure out the rest from there. No arguments now." "I cannot pay," Willa whispered, shame flooding through her along with the fear and grief. "Did I ask you to?" Quinn stood and offered her his hand. "Come on now, Miss Greene. Let me help you." Willa looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Every instinct she had told her she should not trust a strange man, that accepting help came with strings attached, that she was putting herself in danger. But she was already in danger, already without options, and something about Quinn Irving made her want to trust him despite her better judgment. Maybe it was the genuine concern in his eyes, or the way he had positioned himself to protect her privacy, or simply the fact that he had not once looked at her with anything other than respect and compassion. She took his hand. His palm was calloused and warm, and his fingers closed around hers with gentle strength. He helped her to her feet and kept hold of her hand as he guided her up the street, as if sensing that she needed that anchor to keep from flying apart completely. Willa's shoulders still trembled, but somehow having Quinn beside her made it easier to put one foot in front of the other. The boarding house was a 2-story wooden structure that looked well-maintained and respectable. Quinn led her up onto the porch and knocked before opening the door and calling out, "Mrs. Patterson, you have a moment." A woman in her 50s appeared from what looked like the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She had kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, and her expression turned to immediate concern when she saw Willa. "Quinn Irving, what have you brought me?" she asked, but her tone was warm. "This is Miss Willa Greene." She arrived on the afternoon stage expecting to stay with her aunt, but I am afraid her aunt passed recently. Miss Greene finds herself in need of a meal and a place to rest while we sort things out. I will stand the cost." Mrs. Patterson's eyes softened with sympathy. "You poor dear. Come in, come in. You look about ready to collapse." She bustled forward and took over from Quinn, guiding Willa toward the dining room with a gentle but firm hand. "Quinn, you make yourself useful and bring some of that stew from the kitchen. And bread and butter, and whatever fruit we have left from breakfast." Quinn tipped his hat and disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Willa in Mrs. Patterson's capable hands. The older woman settled her at a table near the window and poured her a glass of water from a pitcher on the sideboard. "Drink this slowly now," she instructed. "When did you last have water?" "This morning," Willa said, her voice still shaky. She sipped the water and found it cool and clean, better than anything she had tasted in days of dusty travel. Quinn returned with a laden tray, and soon Willa found herself staring at a bowl of beef stew rich with vegetables, thick slices of fresh bread still warm from the oven, butter and sliced apples. The smell alone made her stomach cramp with hunger. "Eat," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "And while you do, perhaps you can tell us a bit about your situation." Willa ate, slowly at first because her stomach had shrunk from lack of food, and between bites she told them everything. How her parents had died in a fire 2 years ago, leaving her to live with her mother's sister in St. Louis. How her uncle by marriage had turned mean after her aunt died last spring, and how he had started looking at Willa in ways that made her skin crawl. How she had found the letter from her Aunt Margaret here in Kingston, her father's sister, offering her a home and work in her dressmaking shop. How she had saved every penny from her work as a seamstress and left St. Louis with just enough money for the stage fare and not much else, desperate to escape before her uncle did something she could not come back from. "The stage driver told me Aunt Margaret died of fever," Willa finished, staring down at her empty bowl. "I should have written ahead. I should have confirmed she was still alive, but I was so desperate to leave, and I was afraid if I waited for a response my uncle would." She could not finish the sentence. "You did what you had to do," Quinn said firmly. He had taken a seat across from her while she ate, listening to her story with focused attention. "You have nothing to reproach yourself for." "But what do I do now?" Willa looked between him and Mrs. Patterson, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I have 47 cents. I have no family, no home, no prospects. I can sew. I am a good seamstress, but I do not know if there is work for that here, and even if there is, who would hire me with no references, no place to stay, no way to present myself properly?" Mrs. Patterson and Quinn exchanged a long look, something passing between them that Willa could not quite read. "As it happens," Mrs. Patterson said slowly, "I could use some help around here. My girls who do the cooking and cleaning are good workers, but none of them can sew worth a damn, pardon my language. I am always needing linens mended, curtains repaired, that sort of thing. It is not much, but I could offer you room and board in exchange for helping with the sewing and some light housework. Would that suit you for now?" Willa stared at her, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "You would do that, for a stranger?" "Quinn vouches for you, and that is good enough for me," Mrs. Patterson said simply. "Besides, I have been where you are, more or less. Long time ago now, but I remember what it feels like to be alone and afraid with nowhere to turn. We women have to look out for each other." Tears flooded Willa's eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. "Thank you. I do not know what to say. Thank you so much." "Say you will get some rest," Mrs. Patterson said, standing up. "You look dead on your feet. I will show you to your room and you can sleep for a while. Everything else can wait until tomorrow." Willa let herself be led upstairs to a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for storage. Mrs. Patterson left her with a pitcher of fresh water and instructions to rest as long as she needed. Alone for the first time since arriving in Kingston, Willa sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry again, but this time the tears were mixed with relief. She did not know Quinn Irving, did not know what had moved him to help a trembling stranger on the street, but he had quite possibly saved her life. At the very least, he had saved her from a desperate situation that could have ended very badly. She owed him a debt she had no idea how to repay. Exhaustion pulled at her like a physical weight, and Willa finally surrendered to it. She removed her dusty traveling dress, washed her face and hands in the basin, and crawled into bed in her chemise. The sheets were clean and smelled of soap and sunshine, and the pillow was soft beneath her head. Within minutes, she was asleep. When Willa woke, the light coming through the window told her it was morning. She had slept straight through the evening and night, nearly 14 hours of dreamless, exhausted sleep. For a moment she lay still, disoriented and confused about where she was. Then memory returned, and with it, a complicated tangle of emotions. She was in Kingston, New Mexico territory. Her aunt was dead. She was staying at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, and Quinn Irving had helped her when she had no one else. Willa rose and dressed in her other dress, which was not much better than the one she had been wearing, but at least it was clean. She braided her blonde hair back from her face, pinched her cheeks to bring some color to them, and headed downstairs. She found Mrs. Patterson in the dining room clearing away breakfast dishes. The older woman smiled when she saw Willa. "There you are, feeling better." "Much better, thank you. I apologize for sleeping so long." "Nonsense, you needed the rest." "There is still some breakfast left in the kitchen if you are hungry, and then I can show you around and we can discuss what needs doing." Willa ate another good meal, marveling at how different she felt with food in her stomach and a full night's sleep behind her. The trembling that had possessed her yesterday was gone, replaced by a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, things would work out after all. Mrs. Patterson gave her a tour of the boarding house, showing her the linen closets that needed organizing, the curtains that needed mending, and the torn sheets that needed patching. It was clear the older woman really did need help, and Willa felt better knowing she would be earning her keep rather than accepting charity. "Now then," Mrs. Patterson said when they had finished the tour, "there is the matter of Quinn." Willa felt her cheeks heat. "What about him?" "He is a good man, one of the best I have known. He has a ranch about 5 miles outside of town, raises horses and cattle, does well for himself. He lost his wife and baby son to fever about 4 years back, and it near about destroyed him. But he pulled himself together and keeps going. He helps people when he can, does not make a fuss about it, just does what needs doing." "I need to thank him properly," Willa said. "I owe him so much. He will likely be in town today for supplies. Usually comes by on Fridays. You will have your chance." Mrs. Patterson paused, then added carefully, "He is a good man, but he has been alone a long time. I am not matchmaking, mind you, just telling you so you understand. He helped you because he is decent, not because he expects anything in return." "I understand," Willa said, though something in Mrs. Patterson's tone made her think there was more to it than that. She spent the rest of the morning organizing linens and taking inventory of what needed mending. It felt good to have something productive to do, something to focus on besides her own problems. She was elbow-deep in a closet of moth-eaten blankets when she heard Mrs. Patterson call her name. "Willa, dear, you have a visitor." Willa climbed out of the closet, brushing dust from her skirts, and found Quinn Irving standing in the hallway, hat in hand. He looked different in the morning light, less like a rescuing hero and more like a real person. She noticed details she had missed yesterday, the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the way his dark hair was still damp from a recent washing, the lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often though he was not smiling now. "Miss Greene," he said with a small nod. "I wanted to check on you, see how you were settling in." "Much better, thank you. I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I am for what you did yesterday. You and Mrs. Patterson both. I was at the end of my rope and you threw me a lifeline." Quinn shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Willa said firmly. They would not have. Most people would have walked right past me, and you know it, so please let me thank you properly. You helped a stranger for no reason other than kindness, and that means more to me than I can say." Their eyes met, and Willa felt something pass between them, a moment of connection that made her breath catch. Quinn looked away first, clearing his throat. "Well, I am just glad you are all right. Mrs. Patterson treating you well, very well. She has put me to work already, which is exactly what I needed. I am going to earn my keep here." "I have no doubt of that." Quinn turned his hat in his hands, seeming to wrestle with something. "Miss Greene, I wonder if I might ask you something." "Of course. Your Aunt Margaret, she had a dress shop on Silver Street. It is still there, sitting empty. I spoke with the landlord this morning, and he said her belongings are all still inside, including her sewing supplies and fabrics. Said he has been meaning to clear it out but has not gotten around to it. He is willing to let someone take over the lease if they can pay the rent, which is reasonable for this town. I was thinking, if you wanted to continue your aunt's business, you could make a real go of it. Women are always needing dresses, and there is only one other seamstress in Kingston." Willa stared at him, her mind racing. "That is very kind, but I have no money for rent. I could not possibly afford it." "I could loan you the money to get started," Quinn said quickly. "You could pay me back once the business is established. I know it is a lot to take on, especially after just arriving, but I thought I should mention it. Seemed a shame for your aunt's shop to sit empty when you have the skills to run it." "Why would you do that?" Willa asked, not suspiciously but genuinely curious. "You do not know me. I could take your money and disappear, or fail completely and never be able to pay you back." Quinn met her eyes again, and this time he held her gaze. "Call it a feeling. You struck me yesterday as someone who has been knocked down by life, but is not ready to stay down. Someone who would fight for a chance if one was offered. Was I wrong?" Willa felt something fierce and determined rise up in her chest, something she had thought her uncle might have beaten out of her during those terrible months in St. Louis. "No, you were not wrong. Then think about it. No pressure, no expectation of anything in return except the loan paid back when you can manage it. Talk it over with Mrs. Patterson if you like, but the offer stands." He settled his hat back on his head and tipped it to her, preparing to leave. Willa found herself stepping forward, not wanting him to go just yet. "Mr. Irving, would you show me the shop? I would like to see it before I decide." A smile crossed Quinn's face, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. "I would be happy to. Are you free now? Let me tell Mrs. Patterson where I am going." 10 minutes later, Willa found herself walking down Silver Street beside Quinn Irving, very aware of the curious looks they were attracting. A woman and a man walking together without a chaperone was not exactly scandalous in a rough mining town like Kingston, but it would certainly be noticed and remarked upon. Willa found she did not care as much as she probably should have. Quinn stopped in front of a narrow building wedged between a general store and a law office. The windows were dusty but intact, and a faded sign above the door read, "Margaret's Fine Dressmaking." "She set up shop about 6 months before she died," Quinn explained, producing a key. "Was doing well too, from what I heard. Fever took her fast. She was healthy 1 week and gone the next." He unlocked the door and stepped back to let Willa enter first. She walked into the shop and stopped, her hand going to her mouth. It was perfect. The front room was set up as a showroom with a counter, several dress forms displaying partially finished garments, and shelves holding bolts of fabric in various colors and patterns. Through a doorway she could see a workroom with a sewing machine, a cutting table, and more supplies than she had ever seen in one place. Everything was dusty from disuse, and the dress forms were draped in cloth to protect them. But beneath the neglect, She could see the bones of a thriving business. "Oh," Willa breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "Oh, it is wonderful." Quinn had followed her inside and was watching her with that same slight smile. "Your aunt had good taste and good business sense. She invested in quality supplies." Willa walked through to the workroom, running her fingers over the sewing machine. It was a newer model, much better than the one she had used in St. Louis. The cutting table was large and sturdy. The scissors and shears hanging on the wall were good quality, and the thread spools were organized by color in a cabinet with dozens of little drawers. Her aunt had set this up to last, to be a real business that could support her. And now it could be Willa's. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. She had been in Kingston less than a day, and already she was considering taking on a business, going into debt to a man she barely knew, putting down roots in a place that was completely foreign to her. It was madness. It was also exactly what she needed. "How much would you need to loan me?" she asked, turning to face Quinn. "First month's rent and a bit extra for supplies you will need to replenish. Say $50 to start. You can pay me back $5 a month once you are bringing in steady income." Does that sound fair? $50 was a fortune to Willa, who had never had more than a few dollars at a time in her entire life. But it was also possible to pay back at $5 a month, especially if she could build up a steady clientele. "What if I fail?" she asked. "What if I cannot make the business work and I cannot pay you back?" Quinn stepped closer, his expression serious. "Then we will figure something out." "I am not going to put you out on the street, Willa. That is not how this works." He had called her by her first name without the miss, and somehow that small intimacy made her feel braver. "All right then. Yes, I will do it. I will take the loan and take over my aunt's shop and make it work." "I have to make it work." "You will," Quinn said with such certainty that Willa almost believed him. "You have that look about you, stubborn, determined. You will make it work because failure is not an option you are willing to accept." He was right, Willa realized. After everything she had been through, after escaping St. Louis and her uncle and making the long journey west, after arriving with nothing and being offered a chance to build something of her own, failure was simply not acceptable. She would make this work or die trying. They spent the next hour going through the shop, taking inventory of what was there and what would need to be purchased or repaired. Quinn proved to be practical and helpful, pointing out things she might have missed and making sensible suggestions about what should be prioritized. By the time they locked up and headed back to the boarding house, Willa's head was spinning with plans and possibilities. "I will bring the money by tomorrow," Quinn said as they reached Mrs. Patterson's front porch. "That will give you time to think things over and make sure this is what you want." "It is what I want," Willa said firmly, "but I appreciate the consideration." Quinn nodded, then hesitated, that same uncertain expression she had seen earlier crossing his face. "Miss Greene, Willa, I want you to know that I am not expecting anything from you. This loan, it is just business. I am not trying to put you under obligation or looking for anything in return beyond the money paid back over time. You understand?" Willa looked at him. This man who had steadied her trembling shoulders yesterday and was now offering her a future, and felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "I understand. But Quinn, you should know that even if the loan was just business, I would still consider you a friend. You helped me when I needed it most, and that is not something I will forget." The smile that crossed his face then was something to behold, warm and genuine and a little surprised, as if he had not expected her to say that. "Friends, then. I would like that." He tipped his hat and headed back down the street toward where his horse was tied, and Willa watched him go, thinking that perhaps the worst day of her life might have been the beginning of something very good indeed. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Quinn brought the $50 as promised, and Willa paid the rent and bought the supplies she needed. Mrs. Patterson helped spread the word that Margaret's shop was under new management, and within days, Willa had her first customers. They came cautiously at first, curious about the young woman who had taken over Margaret's business. But Willa's skill with a needle and her eye for fit and style quickly won them over. She worked from dawn until well after dark most days, hemming skirts and taking in dresses and creating new garments from the fabrics her aunt had left behind. It was exhausting work, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. For the first time in her life, Willa felt like she was building something that belonged to her, something no one could take away. Quinn came by the shop every few days, ostensibly to check on her progress and make sure she had everything she needed. But Willa suspected he just wanted to visit. They fell into an easy friendship, talking while she sewed, and he sat in the chair by the window, filling her in on the happenings in Kingston and telling her stories about the territory. She learned that he had come west from Texas after the war, that he had built his ranch from nothing, that he had loved his wife deeply, and her death had left a wound that still had not fully healed. In turn, Willa told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about her parents and how much she missed them, about her dreams of having a home and family of her own someday. They talked easily, like old friends despite having known each other less than a month. And Willa found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that had nothing to do with friendship, and everything to do with the way her heart sped up when he walked through the door. She tried to tell herself she was being foolish, that she barely knew him, that she should focus on her business and not on romantic notions. But her heart did not listen to logic, and with each visit, each conversation, each small gesture of kindness, she felt herself falling a little more in love with Quinn Irving. It was Mrs. Patterson who finally addressed the elephant in the room one evening over dinner. "That man is courting you, you know," she said without preamble, passing Willa the potatoes. Willa nearly choked on her water. "He is not. We are friends. Friends do not look at each other the way you two do. Friends do not find excuses to visit every other day. Friends do not smile like fools when the other person's name is mentioned." Mrs. Patterson skewered her with a knowing look. "He is courting you, slowly and carefully, because he does not want to frighten you off, but he is courting you nonetheless. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I do not know what you mean. You like him. He likes you. So what is the problem?" Willa set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. "The problem is that I owe him $50. The problem is that I am here because he helped me when I was desperate. How can I know if what I feel is real or just gratitude? And how can he know if what he feels is real or just some misguided sense of responsibility?" Mrs. Patterson made a dismissive sound. "Child, I have seen gratitude and I have seen love, and they look nothing alike. What is between you and Quinn is real, no matter how it started. But if you are determined to doubt it, why do not you talk to him? Ask him directly what his intentions are. You are a grown woman running your own business, not some simpering girl. You have the right to know where you stand." She was right, of course. Willa had never been one to sit back and let life happen to her, at least not until her uncle had made her feel small and powerless. But she was not that frightened girl anymore. She was a business owner, a woman making her own way in the world, and she had every right to understand the nature of her relationship with Quinn. The next time he visited the shop, Willa made sure they had privacy by locking the door and turning the sign to closed even though it was only mid-afternoon. Quinn raised an eyebrow but did not comment, settling into his usual chair while she finished pinning the hem on a skirt she was working on. "Quinn, I need to ask you something," Willa said without preamble, keeping her eyes on her work because she was afraid if she looked at him she would lose her nerve. "All right. Why do you come by so often? And please do not tell me it is just to check on your investment, because we both know you could do that once a week and be more than satisfied that I am making the business work." There was a long silence. Willa finally looked up to find Quinn watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You want the truth?" he asked. "I want the truth." Quinn stood up and crossed to where she was working, but he did not touch her, just stood close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "I come by because I cannot seem to stay away. Because you are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. Because when I am with you, I feel like maybe I could be happy again, really happy, not just going through the motions of living. Because somewhere between finding you trembling on the street and now, I fell in love with you and I do not know what to do about it." Willa's hands had gone still, the skirt forgotten. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You love me." "I love you," Quinn confirmed. "I know it is too soon, and I know you might not feel the same way, and I know the circumstances of how we met make things complicated. But you asked for the truth, and that is the truth. I am in love with you, Willa Greene, and I have been fighting it for weeks because I did not want to put you in an awkward position or make you feel obligated to me. But I am done fighting it. I love you, and I needed you to know." Willa set down the skirt with trembling hands, but this time they were trembling with emotion rather than fear. "I love you too. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it is just gratitude or that I am being foolish, but it is not gratitude and I am not being foolish. I love you, Quinn. I think I started loving you the moment you steadied my shoulders and told me I was safe." The smile that broke across Quinn's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm and calloused against her cheeks, and when he bent his head to kiss her, Willa rose on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was gentle and sweet and full of promise, a beginning rather than an ending. When they finally pulled apart, Willa was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Now we court properly," Quinn said. "I will call on you, take you to dinner, let everyone in Kingston know that I am serious about you. And when enough time has passed that everyone including us is satisfied that this is real and right, I am going to ask you to marry me, if that is agreeable to you." "That is very agreeable to me," Willa said. "Though I should warn you, I am going to keep working. This shop, it means everything to me. I am not giving it up even after we marry." "I would not ask you to," Quinn said. "I fell in love with a woman who has her own business and her own dreams, and I want to support those dreams, not take them away. We will figure out how to make it all work together." They sealed the promise with another kiss, and then another, until they were both breathless and laughing, and Willa felt like she might float right up to the ceiling from sheer happiness. Quinn did exactly as he promised. He courted her properly, calling on her at the shop and the boarding house, taking her to dinner at the hotel, escorting her to church on Sundays. Kingston was a small enough town that everyone noticed, and within a week it was common knowledge that Quinn Irving was courting the new seamstress. Some people whispered about how fast it was happening, how they had only known each other a few weeks, but most folks seemed happy for them. Quinn was well-liked and respected, and Willa had already earned a reputation as a hard worker and talented seamstress. The courtship progressed through October and into November, as the weather turned cooler and the aspens in the mountains blazed gold before dropping their leaves. Willa paid Quinn $5 at the end of October, her first payment on the loan, and felt a fierce pride in being able to do so. The shop was thriving beyond her hopes, and she had hired a girl named Sarah to help with the simpler tasks so she could focus on the more complex work. Quinn brought her out to his ranch one Sunday in November, and Willa fell in love with the place almost as much as she had fallen in love with the man. It was a beautiful spread with good grazing land, a sturdy ranch house, a barn and outbuildings, and horses grazing in the pastures. Quinn showed her everything with obvious pride, and Willa could picture herself there, could imagine making a home in that house and building a life with him. They were standing on the porch watching the sunset when Quinn pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. "I know we said we would wait, but I cannot wait any more," he said, looking up at her with those dark eyes she had come to know so well. "Willa Greene, you came into my life when I had given up on ever being happy again. You brought light and laughter and love back into my world, and I cannot imagine spending another day without you by my side. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me?" Willa was crying, happy tears this time, as she dropped to her knees in front of him so they were at eye level. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. I love you so much, Quinn." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. Then he kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise, and Willa knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. They married in January of 1882, a small ceremony in the church in Kingston with Mrs. Patterson and a few of Quinn's ranch hands as witnesses. Willa wore a dress she had made herself, pale blue silk with lace at the collar and cuffs, and she carried a bouquet of dried flowers since fresh ones were impossible to find in the middle of winter. She had never looked more beautiful, or so Quinn told her, and the way he looked at her made her believe it. After the ceremony, there was a small party at the hotel with food and music and dancing. Willa danced with her new husband, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When Quinn pulled her close and whispered that he loved her, that he would always love her, that he would shelter and protect her for the rest of their lives, Willa remembered arriving in Kingston with her shoulders trembling in fear and exhaustion. She remembered how Quinn had steadied those shoulders with his strong, gentle hands. He had steadied her then, and he had been steadying her ever since, and now he would shelter her forever. They spent their wedding night at the ranch, and Willa finally felt like she was truly home. The house was warm and welcoming, and Quinn had clearly made an effort to make her comfortable, bringing in extra blankets and making sure the fire was built up. He was gentle with her, patient and loving, and afterward she lay in his arms feeling safe and cherished and loved beyond measure. "I keep thinking this is a dream," she murmured against his chest, "that I will wake up and find myself back in St. Louis, back in that nightmare." "Not a dream," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "This is real. You are my wife and I am your husband, and we have a whole life ahead of us to build together." "Thank you," Willa said softly, "for saving me, for believing in me, for loving me." "You saved yourself," Quinn corrected. "You got yourself out of St. Louis, got yourself to Kingston, took over your aunt's business and made it thrive. All I did was steady your shoulders when they were trembling. The rest was all you." "We saved each other then," Willa decided. "Because you were just going through the motions before we met. You said so yourself. I brought you back to life as much as you gave me a new life." Quinn tightened his arms around her, and Willa felt the truth of those words settle into her bones. They had saved each other, two wounded souls finding each other at exactly the right moment and building something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. The first year of their marriage was full of adjustments and learning to live together, but it was also full of love and laughter and joy. Willa kept her shop in Kingston, riding into town 3 days a week to work, while Sarah managed things the other days. It was a good arrangement that allowed her to maintain her independence and keep the business thriving while also being present at the ranch. Quinn was everything a husband should be, supportive and loving and patient. He helped with the evening chores when she had been in town all day, never complained when she was too tired for anything more than supper and bed, and made it clear that he was proud of her accomplishments. In turn, Willa learned the rhythms of ranch life, helping with the horses when she could and learning to cook the hearty meals that Quinn and his ranch hands needed. In the summer of 1882, Willa realized she was pregnant. She told Quinn one evening after supper, and the joy on his face was tempered with fear. She knew he was thinking of his first wife, of losing her and the baby to fever, and she took his hands in hers. "I am strong and healthy," she said firmly, "and we will get through this together. I am not going anywhere, Quinn Irving. You are stuck with me." Quinn pulled her into his arms and held her tight, and she felt him trembling just as she had trembled that first day in Kingston. This time, it was Willa who did the steadying, who held him and reminded him that they were in this together, that they would face whatever came as a team. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in March of 1883, Willa gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and eyes. They named him Thomas after Quinn's father, and the sight of Quinn holding his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face, was something Willa would treasure forever. Thomas was followed by a daughter, Emily, in 1885, and another son, Robert, in 1887. The ranch house filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, and Willa watched Quinn blossom as a father. He was patient and kind, firm when he needed to be but always loving, and he made sure each of their children knew they were cherished. Willa continued to run her shop, though she scaled back her hours as their family grew. She trained Sarah to take on more responsibility, and eventually Sarah became her business partner, buying into the shop and managing it most days while Willa focused on the more complex commissions and designs. It was a good balance that allowed Willa to be present for her family, while still maintaining the independence and purpose that her work gave her. The years passed in a blur of seasons and celebrations, of challenges overcome and victories celebrated. The ranch thrived under Quinn's management, and Willa's shop became known throughout the territory for quality work. They built a good life together, surrounded by friends and family, and every night Willa went to sleep in Quinn's arms feeling grateful for the chain of events that had brought her to Kingston. When Thomas turned 18 in 1901, Willa and Quinn stood on the porch of the ranch house watching their children play in the yard. Emily was 16 now, beautiful and spirited, already turning heads in Kingston. Robert was 14, all gangly limbs and enthusiasm, working alongside his father and older brother on the ranch. They had done well, Willa thought. They had raised good children and built a strong marriage and created a life worth living. "You ever think about that day?" Quinn asked, pulling her close against his side. "The day you arrived in Kingston, all the time," Willa admitted. "I think about how terrified I was, how alone I felt. And then I think about you steadying my shoulders and offering to help, and how that single moment of kindness changed everything." "I fell in love with you that day," Quinn said. "I did not know it at the time, but looking back, I think I fell in love with you the moment I saw you trembling on that street. Something about you just called to me, made me want to protect you and help you and keep you safe." "You did all of that and more," Willa said. "You sheltered me when I had nowhere to go. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You gave me a home and a family and a love I never thought I would find. You saved my life, Quinn." "And you saved mine," Quinn replied. "We were both lost when we found each other, both damaged and alone. But we built something beautiful together, you and I, something that will outlast us both. He gestured to their children, to the ranch, to the life they had created, and Willa felt tears prick her eyes. He was right. They had built something beautiful, something lasting, and it had all started with a trembling woman on a dusty street and a cowboy kind enough to help her. The years continued to pass, bringing their own share of joys and sorrows. Emily married a good man, a rancher from a neighboring spread, and gave them grandchildren. Thomas took over more responsibility on the ranch as Quinn's back started to complain about the hard work. Robert decided he wanted to study law and headed east to school, though he promised to come back to New Mexico when he was done. Willa and Quinn grew older together, their hair turning gray and their faces lining with the years. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with each passing year, tempered by time and strengthened by everything they had weathered together. On their 30th wedding anniversary in January of 1912, Quinn took Willa back to Kingston, to the spot where they had first met. The town had grown considerably over the years, and Silver Street was now paved and lined with electric lights. But the basics were the same, and Willa could still remember exactly where she had stood, trembling and afraid, before Quinn had steadied her. 30 years, Quinn said, taking her hands in his. They were both in their 50s now, but when Willa looked at her husband, she still saw the strong, kind cowboy who had helped a frightened stranger. 30 years since you stumbled off that stage and into my life. Best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Irving. Best thing that ever happened to me too, Willa said. She looked around at the bustling town, so different from the rough mining camp it had been when she arrived. Do you think if I had known that day what the future held, I would have been so frightened? Maybe not frightened, but probably overwhelmed, Quinn said with a smile. 3 children, 5 grandchildren so far, a successful business, a thriving ranch. That is a lot to take in. I would do it all again, Willa said. Every moment, every challenge, every joy and sorrow. I would do it all again exactly the same way because it led me to you and to this life we have built. Quinn pulled her into his arms right there on the street, not caring who saw or what anyone thought, and kissed her like they were young newlyweds instead of a married couple of 30 years. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. I love you, Quinn said. I loved you when your shoulders were trembling with fear, and I love you now that they are strong and steady. I loved you when you were a frightened girl with nowhere to go, and I love you now as a successful businesswoman and mother and grandmother. I have loved you every day for 30 years, and I will love you every day until I die. And I love you, Willa replied. My cowboy who steadied me when I needed it most and has been sheltering me ever since. My husband, my partner, my best friend. I love you, Quinn Irving, and I always will. They walked back to where their wagon was waiting, hands clasped together. 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that had withstood the test of time. As they rode back to the ranch, Willa thought about the long journey that had brought her from St. Louis to Kingston, from fear and desperation to love and security. She had arrived with trembling shoulders, alone and afraid and certain that her life was over. But Quinn had steadied those shoulders with his strong, gentle hands. He had offered her help when she needed it most, had believed in her when she did not believe in herself, and had loved her with a fierce, protective devotion that had never wavered. He had sheltered her then, and he had been sheltering her ever since, not by making her weak or dependent, but by giving her the safety and security she needed to become strong. He had been her foundation, the solid ground beneath her feet that allowed her to reach for the sky. And in return, she had brought him back to life. She had healed the wounds left by loss and grief, had filled his house with love and laughter, had given him children and a reason to look forward instead of back. They had saved each other, these two wounded souls, and in doing so had created something neither could have built alone. As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, Willa leaned against her husband's shoulder and smiled. She had found her home, her love, her happily ever after, all because a kind cowboy had seen a trembling woman and decided to help. The years that followed their 30th anniversary were peaceful and full of contentment. Quinn finally handed over the day-to-day running of the ranch to Thomas, though he still helped with the horses because some habits were too ingrained to break. Willa officially retired from the dress shop, signing over her share to Sarah's daughter, who had grown into a talented seamstress in her own right. But she still sewed for pleasure, making quilts for her grandchildren and special occasion dresses for Emily and her daughters. They spent their days working in the garden, tending to the horses, playing with their grandchildren when they visited, and simply enjoying each other's company. After so many years of hard work and responsibility, it was a gift to slow down and appreciate what they had built. Robert came back from law school and set up a practice in Kingston, eventually becoming a judge. He married a school teacher, and they had 4 children who loved spending summers at the ranch. Emily's family lived close enough that they saw them at least once a week, and Thomas and his wife lived in the foreman's house on the ranch property with their children. The Irving family had grown large and prosperous, and Willa and Quinn presided over it all with quiet pride. On a warm evening in the summer of 1920, Willa and Quinn sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset. They were both in their late 60s now, their bodies showing the wear of long lives well lived, but they were still together, still in love, still finding joy in each other's presence. "Do you remember," Willa said, "when you told me you would shelter me forever? That first day when you steadied my trembling shoulders?" "I never said that," Quinn replied with amusement. "At least not out loud, but I thought it. I remember looking at you, so scared and vulnerable, and thinking that I wanted to protect you, to make sure you were never that frightened again." "You kept that promise," Willa said, reaching over to take his hand. Their fingers intertwined automatically, a gesture so familiar after nearly 40 years of marriage that it required no thought. "You have sheltered me every day since, not by trapping me or making me dependent, but by being my safe harbor. By giving me a place where I could be strong because I knew you were there to catch me if I fell. And you healed me," Quinn said. "You brought me back from a dark place and taught me how to live again, how to love again. We saved each other, Willa. That has always been the truth of us." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors, their grandchildren came running up onto the porch, full of energy and questions and love. Willa and Quinn welcomed them with open arms, settling the younger ones on their laps and listening to the older ones chatter about their day. This, Willa thought, was what happiness looked like. Not a single perfect moment, but a lifetime of moments strung together like beads on a string. Hard moments and joyful moments, scary moments and triumphant moments, all adding up to a life well lived and a love that had endured. She had arrived in Kingston, New Mexico territory with trembling shoulders, certain that her life was over. But a cowboy with kind eyes and gentle hands had steadied those shoulders and offered her hope. He had loved her, supported her, believed in her, and sheltered her through nearly 4 decades of marriage. And she had done the same for him, healing his wounded heart and filling his life with light and love. As night fell over the ranch and the stars began to emerge in the vast New Mexico sky, Willa looked at her husband and smiled. They had built something beautiful together, something that would outlast them both in their children and grandchildren, and the legacy of love they left behind. Quinn met her eyes and smiled back. that same warm smile she had fallen in love with all those years ago. He squeezed her hand gently, a wordless reminder that he was there, that he would always be there, that he had meant every promise he had ever made to her. Willa squeezed back, her own promise, her own vow renewed every day for 40 years. They had found each other against all odds, had built a life and a love that had weathered every storm, and they would face whatever time they had left together, hand in hand, heart to heart. The woman who had arrived with trembling shoulders was long gone, replaced by someone strong and confident and secure. But she had never forgotten that first day, that first moment of kindness that had changed everything. She had never forgotten the cowboy who had steadied her when she was falling apart. And she never would. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. The trembling woman and the cowboy who helped her, who fell in love and built a life together in the wild west of New Mexico territory. It was a simple story, really, but then the best love stories often were two people, both wounded and alone, finding each other at exactly the right moment. One offering help, the other accepting it with courage and determination. Love growing slowly and steadily, built on friendship and respect and genuine affection. A marriage that endured through joy and sorrow, through easy times and hard. Children raised and loved, a business built and sustained, a ranch that prospered and grew. A lifetime of love, all because a cowboy saw a trembling woman and decided to help. All because Willa Greene arrived in Kingston with trembling shoulders, and Quinn Irving steadied them and sheltered her forever. Years later, after both had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their children found a letter Willa had written but never sent, tucked away in her sewing box. It was addressed to Quinn, though they had spent almost every day together for 4 decades. The letter read, "My dearest Quinn, I am writing this though I may never give it to you, because some things need to be written down even if they are never read. Today marks 40 years since I arrived in Kingston, trembling and afraid and certain my life was over. I keep thinking about that girl I was, so young and frightened, with nowhere to go and no one to help her. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even known how to pray. You steadied my shoulders with your strong, gentle hands. You offered me help without asking for anything in return. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You saved my life that day, but more than that, you gave me a life worth saving. You loved me with a fierce, protective devotion that never once made me feel weak or small. You supported my dreams while building our life together. You gave me children and a home and 40 years of love beyond anything I ever imagined possible. I have been thinking about the word shelter lately. When you offered to shelter me, I thought you meant protection from the world, a safe place to hide. But that is not what you gave me at all. The shelter you provided was not walls to hide behind, but a foundation to build upon. You gave me the security I needed to be brave, the support I needed to be strong, the love I needed to flourish and grow. You sheltered me not by making me dependent, but by being dependable. Not by limiting me, but by believing I was limitless. Not by keeping me safe from the world, but by being my safe harbor in the world. And I hope, my darling, that I gave you the same. I hope I was your shelter as you were mine. I hope I healed your wounded heart as you steadied my trembling shoulders. I hope our love was the kind that made us both better, stronger, more complete. If I could go back to that day 40 years ago, knowing everything that would come, all the joy and sorrow and everything in between, I would do it all exactly the same. I would stumble off that stage with trembling shoulders and let you steady me. I would accept your help and fall in love with you and build this beautiful, complicated, wonderful life with you. Because you, Quinn Irving, were the best thing that ever happened to me. You were my salvation and my shelter, my best friend and my great love. You were everything I needed and more than I ever deserved. Thank you for steadying me when I was falling apart. Thank you for sheltering me through 40 years of marriage. Thank you for loving me, for believing in me, for being my partner in all things. Thank you for being my cowboy, my hero, my home. Forever yours. Willa. The children cried when they read it, moved by their mother's words and the depth of love she had felt for their father. They had that letter framed and hung it in the ranch house, a testament to a love story that had begun with trembling shoulders and ended only when death parted them. But even death could not truly separate them, for their love lived on in the family they had created, in the businesses they had built, in the lives they had touched. Every child and grandchild and great-grandchild carried a piece of that love forward, a legacy more valuable than any material inheritance. The dress shop in Kingston still operated, now run by Sarah's great-granddaughter, and there was a small plaque inside that read, "Founded by Margaret Greene, 1880. Rebuilt by Willa Greene Irving, 1881. The Irving Ranch was still in the family, passed down through the generations, still raising horses and cattle in the New Mexico sun. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right across the porch of the ranch house, people swore they could hear it, the whisper of a promise kept, of shoulders steadied and souls sheltered, of a love that had endured beyond death itself. She had arrived with trembling shoulders. The cowboy had steadied them and sheltered her forever, and they had lived happily ever after, just as the best love stories promised they would. The end.